Hey, Bekir. Bekir, how are you doing?
You are muted. I'm not hearing you.
You are muted. Oh, I can hear you.
Thank
Um,
you. I
can you
can
hear
hear
me?
you now.
Oh,
How are
very good,
you?
very good, very good. I'm happy to see you. You look,
I'm also very happy to see
hey,
you.
listen, you are well dressed. Now you are well dressed.
Yeah, as usual.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
I
my team
remember,
is here.
yeah,
My
keep
team,
talking.
yeah, actually, they like to know who you are, so it is an opportunity for them to know. I'm very pleased. My admin head is here, Elsun Hanım. She is sitting, Ilsu is here, Gözde is here, Fatma is here, so they are all here.
Very,
So probably you will
I,
see them later, not now.
yeah, I have the feeling that there's a big audience because they wrote to me on LinkedIn. Lots of these Turkish friends. I have many of them, and they wrote to me on LinkedIn. Um, anyway,
Thank
happy.
you. We also did the same to Japanese side as well as the Korean, Hong Kong University Polytechnic. They have an advertisement circle, so probably you'll be advertised in the South Asia as well as Africa, the North Africa, and all everywhere. Let us see how it happens. The only problem is the time shift because there is like midnight.
Yes,
But here is afternoon, so America is morning. So I do not know how we're going to make it
but
happen.
but
So what we
but
do,
but you just discovered that Turkey is in the middle. Turkey is,
yes.
yeah, that's right. No, actually, if you put a pin in on the center of gravity of Eurasia, you find out Turkey or something close to Turkey. Um,
Yeah,
oh, here's the world famous Ümit Güneş. He just showed up. I see him.
yeah.
Uh, in
So what
fact,
happened?
yeah, you
In,
talk.
in, yeah, what we have done was is that the webinar, we don't allow the attendees to speak, only to send us if there are some questions or if some
Very
others.
good.
So
That's right. Yeah.
Dr. Güneş cannot interfere for talking, but yet he can always communicate.
Correct. That's the way to do it. Yes, I agree. And I will be here all the time, especially after the video that you'll show, because you have the video, correct?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're
And
putting on YouTube.
yeah, after you show the video, I will be here for questions. Yeah.
Very, yeah. So we'll take the video part, your presentation only, questions and answers we record, but we may not put on the YouTube.
Fine.
Is this
Everything
what?
is fine. Yeah, fine.
Okay.
Everything is fine.
Yeah, this is great. I'm very happy to see you. We like to invite you to TGU.
What?
TGU is the Turkish-Japanese University of Science and Technology.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on your appointment. I'm in fact very impressed by your dedication to making a difference, and especially riding on your tremendous career, which is published. I think this is very important, and frankly, I feel ashamed when I look at where you have advanced. So no one has invited me to be the president of anything. Okay. Yeah, I just gave a speech in Bucharest. I told them that they vote for me to become the president of the country. They have elections very soon, and they knew that I was joking. But other than that, things are okay. One of these days, as I wrote to you, I would like to see you in person, most likely in Turkey, meaning in Istanbul, and that's my desire now in the near term. In fact,
We like, yeah. Adrian, the voice somehow it's a little cut when you're talking, but we like to invite you to TGU, my university, and we like you to be at least sometimes with us, like maybe 1 year or more. Stay with us because Istanbul is a beautiful, perhaps the city, as you know. And you remember when I was in Saudi Arabia, when we were talking, you like Boaz and also a kind of a red wine. You remember?
I did not understand what you're referring to.
When we were in Saudi Arabia, you told me that you like Istanbul Bosphorus.
Yeah.
And something, a drink. You remember the red wine? So we'll be inviting you to come to Turkey.
Okay, fine. Okay, I'm in favor. I'm in favor of Turkey and the drink. Yes. Well, in fact, I told you more than once. Romanians have a good feeling toward the Turks. This is a feeling that was developed over many centuries because of the policy of the Ottomans, which was benevolent toward the Romanian principalities. And today, especially when in view of what's happening in Ukraine, Romanians are commenting on the difference, yes, in which Turkey is admired, actually.
Thank you.
Keep that in mind. Okay.
Yeah, Adrian, it is now time. Looks like we have a good number of audience now join. So they are listening to us. So what I like to do is that I like to introduce you first, and then I'll give the platform for you to talk. And when you start talking, or when I start introducing you, we will start recording and then make a video and put onto the YouTube. I like you to be aware of this. Okay?
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Professor Adrian BEJAN, he is a J.A. Jones Distinguished Professor of Mechanical Engineering. Professor BEJAN was awarded the Benjamin Franklin Medal 2018 and the Humboldt Research Award 2019. His research covers engineering, science, and applied physics, thermodynamics, heat transfer, convection design, and evolution in nature. In reality, he received many awards. I just mentioned two of them, the recent awards, but I'm sure he received a lot of awards. He is ranked among the top 1 in 1,000% of the most cited and impactful world scientists and the top 10 in engineering worldwide in the 2019 Citation Impact database created by Stanford University's John Lonidis in PLOS Biology. He is the author of 30 books and 700 peer-reviewed articles. His age index is over 108, with 87,000 citations in Google Scholar. He received 18 honorary doctorates from universities in 11 countries. I know him personally. I'm honored to welcome him today for his talk. So please, if you have any questions during the presentation, just write it to us, type it to us, then we will record them and we will direct it to him after his talk. Thank you, Professor Adrian BEJAN. The floor is for you to talk. Thank you.
Thank you, President Ilbash, for the invitation. I prepared a 50-minute video version of my Kimberly-Clark Award lecture, which the university will play for you, and I will be available for questions right after the video. So go ahead with the video, please.
Professor Adrian and audience, we download the video. Now video will be on. So please, thank you for being patient with us. So we'd like to share the video now. Can you see the video, Adrian?
Yes, it's perfect.
Okay.
First, I would like to thank the International Society for Porous Media for the Kimberly Clark Distinguished Lectureship Award for the year 2023, which gives me this opportunity to present to you today's lecture on vascular materials. And the sound has disappeared.
No.
Conveying or live. This word does not come from biology. It comes from the Latin language, meaning it is a very old word. It is so old that it has been imported in many domains, as you'll see throughout my lecture. Design is also a Latin word, which means it's both a noun and a verb, referring to how to make a sketch, a pattern, an outline, or a drawing, because dessin in French means that, drawing, as does disegno in Italian. And the two photographs on the left make the point that the vascular design is at all scales that we can perceive. The river delta and the human lung convince us that vascular design is everywhere. And because of this, vascular design is uniting the animate with the inanimate. And this means that vascular design represents all nature, which means physics. A few words about myself. All research, especially the original one, is autobiographical. My own involvement in porous media research has been a series of very fortunate accidents. I spent 8 years at MIT as a student. In my graduate work, I was designing and building and testing a superconducting winding that was bathed by flowing liquid helium and also rotating at 3600 RPM. You see a sketch on the right. 2 years after that, as a Miller Fellow at the University of California, Berkeley, I had the great fortune to be hosted by Professor Chang Lin Tian, who introduced me to the science of flows through porous media, specifically Darcy flow. And then after Berkeley, I continued in that direction with fundamental studies on about other regimes, Darcy and higher Reynolds number, and also porous media with coarse structure. And particularly, I found myself attracted by the importance of flow configuration, which means design, and the evolution of that in the direction of endowing the system that relies on flow through porous media to have a greater performance. Along the way, with Don Neal in New Zealand, we actually wrote this book called Convection in Porous Media, which now is in the 5th edition. One example from my beginnings in this domain have to do with the natural convection in partial enclosures. It's called partial penetration of natural convection. You see here two things. The orientation of the system matters, but also the aspect ratio of the system decides whether the entire body is penetrated by flow. And that means that the performance of this cooling flow is dictated by the configuration, not only by the properties of the porous medium saturated with flowing fluid. Another example is the two-dimensional enclosure filled with a porous medium and heated from the side. That's the leftmost drawing, or in the middle, the heating is from below, as in a binary convection in a layer of saturated porous medium. And on the right, the streamlines around the buried point heat source in a fluid saturated porous medium. Speaking of autobiography, I'm amused to remember that I made this drawing, the one that looks like the eyes of the cat, with India ink and with many French curves, meaning by hand, not by computer. Now, the real story. Predicting design evolution, once again, begins with the meaning of the words. To predict, one needs a reliable mental viewing, which is called idea, of how something should be. And this is very important. To know how something should be is to know the future of that something before you look at it. And for that, you need a reliable principle, a law. To predict is theory, and theory is not to be confused with empiricism. In the blue domain, we have a single image review of where movement comes from an energy source that pushes an energy current through a flow architecture. There are many of these architectures in the blue. The architecture is actually an engine that delivers work to some entity that's part of the ambient and rejects the difference between input and output as heat. The next part of the physics is that nothing moves unless it is pushed. So you see here the engines in the blue domain, the produced work or power per unit time are in fact responsible for moving something on Earth. And that movement dissipates the power. And you can see the conservation of energy from left to downward in the drawing. You don't see the second law, except to notice that the movement from left to right proceeded to a distance. That was, of course, in proportion to the work that was delivered to the mover. The other part of the picture is that from time to time, the configurations that populate the blue domain and the green domain are morphing. They're evolving. They're changing all the time. What I sketched in the rectangular dashed box is true of everything that a human being can perceive. The air and oceanic currents, the animals and the vehicles, and many other things that appear today in neologisms such as live matter, robotics, sustainability, life, and climate. The movement that is driven by power with evolutionary design unites the geophysical with the biological and with the social dynamics. And in other words, design is not one image. It is movies that are running simultaneously in the cinema of the observer. And so this reality has a one phrase summary, which I wrote in 1996. I call it the constructive law of design evolution in nature.
for a flow system to persist in time, and that means to live in thermodynamics, it must evolve with freedom such that it provides greater access to what flows. I illustrated this particular statement with 3 images from the movie of a river basin on the floor of a laboratory. From moment to moment, the tree-shaped flow changes, but it remains a tree. And from left to right, that tree flows more and more easily, which means in this particular case, it is driven by gravity by shorter and shorter peaks of sand on the floor of the laboratory. So with this introductory set of definitions behind us, I come to vascular design and its usefulness. Well, vascular design is useful because, as you saw in the preceding slide, it facilitates the flow or the transfer of something that flows by diffusion on areas, in volumes, and in societies of animals and people. And the flow, in the examples that I showed you so far, is arborescent. Once again, this point of view of how the arborescent architecture is in fact predicted came from stating in 1996 the problem of how to facilitate flow from one rectangular area to one point. This is the problem sketched in the upper left rectangle. Well, the answer is by shaping the rectangle in a particular way, which happens to be the second rectangle in the column on the left. And the phenomenon is, once again, the change in the shape of the image in a particular direction in time. This development has been running its own movie, as you see in the lower row of images, toward more complicated arborescent architectures that facilitate flow from a rectangle to a point. Here are a few more examples. On the left, the domain is square, it generates heat, and the cooling is arborescent, that is, arborescent channels travel by a coolant that enters through the center of the square. In the middle two columns, which show really a cut through a wall that's heated intensely from the left. The cooling enters through channels from the right. In one case, the channels are parallel slits. In the other, they are tree-shaped channels. And well, those are arborescent architectures coming from the mind and then from computer simulations. You can, in fact, admire these things in your own kitchen experiments. This is my own experiment in the kitchen with coffee grounds from making Turkish coffee. This is on the inside of a funnel. You can see here that the draining of the water from the saturated porous medium is accompanied by erosion, and the erosion creates an architecture of that resembles a river basin. Here we have computer simulations of the same phenomenon in every rectangular area. The water is falling from above, and it is discharged to the left through a erodible, saturated porous medium. So the flow becomes more intense near the exit, and because of that, the erosion is more intense near the exit. However, the channels are developing in the expected dendritic fashion, just like the river basin. If the original porous medium is uniform, as in the upper row, then the emerging trees of flow through porous medium are symmetric. If the original porous medium is randomly distributed with, let's say, erodible material interspaced with rocks and other accidents, the emerging river basin looks random. And that is an illusion because, yes, the original material was unknown to the flow before the flow started to erode the material. However, in every single case, the architectures are trees, and the principle that gave birth to every single image in this running movie is a single principle. This principle of evolutionary design with freedom. With the idea of facilitating flow access by morphing the architecture, the designer can fast forward the design. For example, if the challenge is to make a drawing of access from one point to a line, as in the upper left drawing, then in the simplest, that is starting from the fact that the shortest line between 2 points is a straight line, one can make the drawing shown at the top. The drawing comes from the elemental drawing in the upper right, which shows that if the rectangular area is fixed, but the shape of the area can vary, then the shortest path from one corner of the rectangle to the midpoint of the opposing side is present in the rectangle that has an aspect ratio of 1 divided by 2. So that means a diagonal channel with an angle of 45 degrees. If the problem is to engineer flow access between 2 parallel lines, then the solution, that is a first step in the direction of an answer, is to have the design from the top alternating with the same design upside down. And then this leads to the question of is the design with alternating trees offering greater access than the much simpler design of shown at the bottom, which consists of parallel channels connecting the top line with the bottom line. It turns out that the alternating trees are considerably more permeable to flow when the number of their levels of bifurcation is greater than 4. Presently, in the upper drawing, the number of levels of bifurcation is 3. So the arborescent architectures are everywhere. For example, in every living organ, such as the muscle, that is a volume that's made by one stream entering as arterial blood and exiting as venous blood. As shown with the red and blue, the body is inhabited by 2 trees, meaning a vasculature consisting of 2 trees matched canopy to canopy. Imagine 2 trees sharing the same canopy. That is the vascular design of the living organ. The middle and the right drawing show much of a property of a flowing design. It is the property of speltness, which is a number that accounts for the relative thinness of the channels that carry the flow. And you'll see very soon that the thinness or lightness is very, very important when it comes to transporting the organ on a greater system, animal or vehicle, that needs that organ. Here's another benefit from getting to know vascular design. In evolution, if you read the news, there's a constant surprise that species vanish and the new species appear, meaning that evolution, most of it in the imagination of the biologist, is of two kinds: gradual changes, often imperceptible changes, accompanied by relatively looking dramatic changes. I mentioned the species are vanishing. Well, on the left, I show two specimens of trees matched canopy to canopy, two squares, stream enters from the left and exits to the right. In the top design, the channels are orthogonal. In the lower specimen, the channels are diagonal. The measure of performance of each of these organs is the pumping power or the pressure drop across the square. That is indicated in dimensional terms on the ordinate of the graph, meaning that the better performance belongs to the specimen that has a lower value on the ordinate. And you see there are two curves, which indicate that when the size of the specimen is small, that the n squared is the number of elemental little squares inside the specimen. So when the specimen is small, then the easier flowing is offered by the orthogonal design. And then there is a change to the diagonal design, an abrupt change, when the complexity or the fineness, the graininess of the specimen is sufficiently greater. Here are a few more images of this. Let's call it predictive architecture of the organ. In the upper element, the yellow generates heat. And then the heat is carried away by a stream that enters cold, shown in blue, and exits hot, shown in red. If for a larger domain that generates heat, the wise way to cool is to take 11 of those elements and assemble them in alternating fashion into the middle drawing, which is called a first construct. And then for even larger scales or larger organs or larger packages of electronics, you can take 7 of the middle constructs and make the second construct shown at the bottom. Of course, in the nature, these 90-degree angles between mother channels and tributaries are not happening. Those angles themselves come from freedom to change in the direction of offering greater access, and this is why the angles have relatively precise values if you know the principle of evolutionary design. And finally, this idea could be taken with ease in the other direction, which is a three-dimensional object. You can see here in the middle drawing the yellow element that's bathed in the manner that I've shown several times in the preceding slides. More elements fill a volume in the third direction, which is indicated in pink. And then larger three-dimensional bodies are bathed by a single stream with two trees matched canopy to canopy, as indicated in the construction in the column on the right. Vasculature is not necessarily tree-shaped. It can be much simpler. You can imagine a body filled with trees that have a single channel. That's why I introduce you now to vascular design consisting of spacings and inserts. For example, a body that generates heat from many platelets spaced uniformly through the volume and by natural convection from below. The architecture has a single degree of freedom, which is the spacing between two adjacent plates. And it also has performance. If the objective is to cool the whole body, then the drawing that's the coolest is the one in the middle, and that is due to the spacing, which is a single degree of freedom. Now the principle behind the spacing, if you imagine what goes on between the plates, is that the boundary layers that coat each plate do not interfere with each other. They touch only at the exit. And that means that the spacing is dictated by the thickness of the boundary layer, or that the length of the plate is dictated by the entrance length of the flow. More complicated architectures with spacings and inserts are shown here. Instead of a single length scale, as in the previous example, one could have two or three in the direction from left to right. The pulling of the body becomes more uniform, it is better, but also to the right, one runs without trying into the physics phenomenon of diminishing returns. Next, the sequence of drawings that I showed you shed light on our power to predict the evolution of such drawings over time. In the lower right, you see the beginning of the pulling of packages of electronics, which are bodies filled with coarse porous media permeated by flow. In the beginning, the flow was driven by natural convection. You see the first segment of that rising curve. It has a slope that points toward the greater heat transfer density in that package as the dimension of the body decreases. So the direction from towards smaller bodies began with the first version of the design. Then, when natural convection was replaced by forced convection, the trend continued, but at a faster pace. And that the change in the pace was responsible for the dramatic shift from natural convection cooling to cooling provided by power, meaning a fan that pushes the coolant through the channels. And most recently, as you saw in the birth of the constructor law, the cooling is by pure conduction. There are no channels for fluid flow. So now we have in the upper square a design that's based on solid inserts. The trend continued at an even greater pace, and that was responsible for the second transition from the old specimen, forced convection cooling, to the new species, which is that of cooling by heat conduction. Miniaturization is another name for the direction of evolutionary design in this interesting combination of a gradual change accompanied or interspaced with dramatic changes. Why is the designer and the user interested in smaller bodies with coarse porous structures with fluid flowing through them? Well, because once again, those organs are useful on something else, much bigger, the mover, the animal or the vehicles. If the question is what should be the size of the component, the vascular body, then there are many sizes one could contemplate, except that we know from thermodynamics that when the body is bigger, the channels are wider, the heat transfer surfaces are larger, and so in that direction, irreversibility is decreased, the destruction of useful power, and that accounts for the descending curve in this drawing. In the same direction, for the larger sizes, the fuel spent by the body for the purpose of carrying the component increases proportionally. So these are two trends that come in conflict, and at the intersection between the two, one arrives at the recommended size for the component, which is in fact the size of an imperfect component. One that is actually much better for the whole body that moves on the landscape. In other words, the animal design, the vehicle design is a wiser and wiser construct of imperfect organs. This is important to know. With this, we predict the unending future of both technology and medicine, you see. Now, why is this so-called preferable size of the organ decreasing over time? Well, it does because the descending curve slides downward as one era is replaced by another era. It slides downward because designs are actually improving. For example, in technology, the flow architecture gets better if one learns that the vascular design is better than some other designs. And because of this migration of the descending curve downward, the intersection is also migrating downward toward not only better performance, but also smaller sizes. So the future of a technology is in the hands of the person who knows the principle of design evolution everywhere. The largest domain that could use what I'm sharing with you today is that of structures for heat exchange or mass exchange. Heat exchangers are very old and actually only 200 years old domain, but it is of course much older in nature. Although I have to tell you that what I'm going to show you next was not copied from nature, far from it. But it's important to know that what we're discussing is in fact in accord with flow architectures that occur by themselves in this direction of evolutionary design that began today's lecture. On the left, the drying of mud of wet mud in the wind. It happens with the emergence of mud cracks. The mud cracks are hierarchical. Everywhere you look, you see tiny trees of cracks in the mud. and they facilitate the evaporation of water from the wet soil. In the middle photograph, you see what happens in the last stages of boiling rice. This is right before it becomes rice Japanese style. You see the birth of vertical chimneys that occur for the purpose of vehicling the steam from the base of the pan to the atmosphere. On the right, an artist's cross-section through a swarm of honeybees attached to a tree branch in India. The bees can withstand temperatures lower than 35 degrees Celsius. In the left half of the drawing, when the ambient temperature is low, say 5 degrees, the heat generated by the colony is dissipated to the ambient through heat conduction, through thermal diffusion. On the right, during a hot day, the bees rearrange themselves in order to permit the ambient air to rise by buoyancy through the body of the colony. And these channels are nature's way of facilitating transfer in a body with coarse pores. In the technology of heat exchanger design, this idea has, meaning one success story led to 2 or 3 more. From left to right, the designs with 1 degree of freedom or accompanied by designs with more degrees of freedom, and even more degrees of freedom in 3-dimensional designs, as in the rightmost drawing of a heat sink consisting of identical pin fins. Or in now getting closer to most common design of heat exchangers, cylinders and cross flow. The architecture, especially in the direction of getting smaller and smaller, looks like a multi-scale package of grains in cross flow. Heat exchangers are cataloged, let's say, historically in images of this kind. This is from the Second World War era, primarily due to a case in London and Stanford. The package of tubes and cross flow is complicated. In cross section, you see tubes of a particular arrangement, meaning that there are many arrangements in the handbook. Each tube is covered by fins. The fins are also an architecture with a lot of freedom to change, and the performance is summarized by those 2 curves. The upper one accounts for the pressure drop across the tube bank, or if you want the appropriately defined friction factor. And the lower curve accounts for the sister phenomenon, which is that of intimate thermal contact between coolant, meaning the fluid, and the solid surfaces. And the fact that both curves are descending to the right gradually as the flow rate increases indicates or reassure us that there is a quote analogy unquote between fluid friction and heat transfer. So this is the classical part of fluid flow and also heat transfer. It is even better known if one focuses on the fluid friction aspect, the top curve, for a single pipe with flow through it, where the coarseness is due to the fact that the inner side of the pipe is coated with the roughness or protuberances of a greater and greater size. And today this is known as the Moody chart. Although the data and the drawing came from in Göttingen in the Institute of Ludwig Prandtl. And Prandtl is the one who made this chart famous in the first edition of his extremely famous textbook called, in English, it would be called Guide in Flow Theory. And now, those of us who know the fluid mechanics and how to treat it for flow through porous media, we can express this, present this image, the so-called Moody chart, in this dimensionless manner, by using the permeability of the porous pore structure. On the ordinate, a new dimensionless group that accounts for pressure drop. On the ordinate, the pore Reynolds number, and the upper curve is actually a bundle of many curves that account for tubes of, bags of thin tubes in cross flow. Next, the skeptics among us may wonder, why is this vascular design evolution important to me? Well, here is the answer to that. Our own life is a vascular flow through the structure that occupies the landscape. Movement in the city, you see it here represented as tree-shaped flows on top of such flows through the grid of the city. The grid makes us blind to the tree-shaped flow, but the crowd that converges from the city to one point of attraction, such as the basketball arena, is that river basin of human flow. At the end of the game, the same flow returns to the area as a circular, if you want, river delta. So the vascular flow is our flow on Earth at the scale, but also at larger scale. These are the air routes over Europe. These are the routes where the actual body is flying, and they're a grid that looks more complicated than the city grid, but through the grid, people are covering the yellow territory in arborescent flow fashion. Not only that, but through those red channels, the bodies that travel are a population that is hierarchical. The airplanes and of course the natural flyers are, each of them represent populations consisting of few large and many small. In other words, hierarchy is the name for the bodies that flow through those channels that cover Europe, or the whole globe for this matter. These are this is an image of people scouring the Earth thanks to aviation. The image comes from the condensation trails left by old flying aircraft. The blue shows that the whole globe has access to any point on the globe. However, just like the red blood cells in the circulatory system, to move from one point to another far away, the individual has to travel through the heart of the vascular flow architecture. And the heart, you see it, it is where it was born, initially at small scale in Europe and North America. So aviation is a design now with a predictable past, but also with foreseeable future. The conclusion is that the vascular design is the icon for the hierarchy in the movement on Earth. and also hierarchy in the consumption of fuel that drives that movement. The next slide, let's start with the graph on the left, shows that the annual consumption of fuel is essentially proportional to the wealth of that particular country annually, called GDP, or gross domestic product. This is true for countries large and small, or groups of countries large and small. They fall amazingly on the diagonal. In the graph on the right, the same data arranged on a per capita basis. The cloud is once again positioned on the diagonal, but it is thicker, somewhat thicker, because of other effects that you can learn if you read the Freedom and Evolution. In any case, vascular design is the icon for the physics of hierarchy in movement, fuel use, and wealth. And finally, vascular design alerts us to who we are. If we don't know already, the artists are ready to awaken us. Here is the art of Juana Gomez, one of the leading figures in the new art current called constructal art. Her work is hand embroidery. You see the vasculature everywhere on the human body, the brain, of course. And in other words, that each of us is a jungle of walking trees on the surface of the earth. Keep an eye on the hand, which she called ramification. The hand appears again here, or actually appeared earlier in a drawing made by Da Vinci in the lower left. And over time, and that's the icon of the naked human. Over time, the weak Homo sapiens was being attached itself, or it attached itself to artifacts, tools, the wrench, the intelligent arm, all in the direction of making the naked human body more powerful than it is, and for that matter, a better mover, and so on. And on the right, speaking of fourth reporters media, the extraction of oil from deposits in the empty quarter of Saudi Arabia has evolved from the single well that's in the 30s as a vertical shaft to the arborescent well that explores the deposits in all promising directions. So that is how vascular design predicts the future of us and also the environment in which we thrive. To read more, I show you textbooks that I wrote about vascular theory and design evolution. This, by the way, the sequence of books also shows my own evolution in developing and understanding vascular design theory and application. And during the past 10 years, I've been presenting these ideas to the general public, which means that the books that I have here, all of them, the Design of Nature, the Physics of Life, Freedom and Evolution, and Time and Beauty, are, in my opinion, highly recommended to your students and to your children and to your grandchildren, especially to the young who stand to benefit from better and better decisions in life.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Bekir.
Thank you, Adrian, for very nice and very kind of informative presentation. We're really impressed with that. First of all, I will give platform for the audience. Anybody wants to ask question, please send us the question in written. Then I will translate it to send to or ask to Professor Adrian BEJAN accordingly.
Yeah, before you begin, I would like to acknowledge that the film that you watched was made by Professor Ümit Güneş from Yıldız University when he was with me as a visiting professor here last year. So thank you, Ümit.
Yeah, I'm still waiting for the input. Yeah, I think I should thank also Ümit for his great effort. And I had a meeting with him actually some time back, and hopefully we will have meeting more in near future. Sure. Meantime, while we are waiting the questions, may I ask you one or two questions if you would like to answer? I think it is great what you mentioned today. I'm just wondering how the human flow can be presented in terms of the vascular flow, like how the cultural constraints or the mindset can influence on the human flow in terms of the constructal law. Means that how can we predict how the people would behave in terms of the flow, having a different background and a different culture. I don't know if you have looked into this.
Yes, in fact, answers to your question are the material in my recent book, Freedom and Evolution. The constructor law, which is a general statement, has immediate implications in the direction that you sketched. Throughout nature, everything that moves exhibits a tendency toward moving more easily, farther, faster, and with greater staying power or permanence. And in other words, so this movement, which is evolutionary as a flow architecture, is possible because every mover is surrounded by freedom to move in space and also in time, to choose direction and to choose a rhythm, for that matter. If you think about animal locomotion, it's all rhythmic, periodic, and so now translating this general observation into what matters to us most. Sure, the movement of humanity is like all the other movements. It is hierarchical, not one size fits all. Number one. Number two, that hierarchy benefits everybody who is part of this flow. In other words, the slogans of Marxism, exploitation, and all these other things are not the physics. Collaboration, cooperation, coexistence, harmony are much better words, and of course stability, permanence, and the future are much better words with which to describe this particular design. and these things that are self-evident are worth teaching, especially today where the world is I would say constantly in the convulsions driven by misunderstanding. That's basically the why the subject is important at our level as human movers, which means life.
Yeah, there is another question. Thank you, Adrian. It looks quite interesting. The cultural constraints are critically important, what my understanding from you for the human flow. There is another question would come is, how is human aging and vascular design related to? Let me read it again. How is human aging and vascular
yeah,
related?
okay. Okay, great. Another coincidence is that my most recent book, Time and Beauty, addresses that question. Yeah, human aging is actually two things. Before we get to be old, we grow. We grow from infancy, from the crib, into adulthood, and I explain in this most recent book that human perception of the environment, the niche, is not a continuous process. It is a sequence of fast, very many snapshots. The eyes are scanning the surroundings with rapid movements. So when the body grows, the signals from the retina are transmitted over longer and longer distances because all the length scales in the body increase as the body grows. At the same time, even when we're young, the paths that are traveled are getting not only longer but also more complex, more complicated, with more bifurcations and other features. And along the way into old age, the paths break down, and there is degradation of all the flows in the human body. In other words, the speed of transmission decreases while the length of transmission increases, and this means that the time interval required by one snapshot increases with age. And now the brain, which was actually formed in the crib in infancy, was developed expecting a very large number of snapshots during daytime, which is a fixed interval of clock time. But in old age, the same brain, because of all the physical features I described, is receiving considerably fewer snapshots. And the brain that then communicates to the person the feeling that nighttime arrived too soon. Nighttime, or the new year, or the 10 years after, arrived too soon. And this process has only one direction, the direction toward feeling that the days get shorter as we get older. And that being the case, meaning the physics, there are ways in which to alleviate this kind of feeling. The most immediate that I describe in the book, I practiced it during the pandemic, is to fill the day with things that are new or interesting, unusual, unexpected. And by the way, everyone in this discussion, I see that you're academics, also students. You're very well, in fact, you're lucky to be in a place where new things happen all the time, because research is about new ideas, new things, and alone or with others, meaning new human events, which is the opposite of being stuck in a cave somewhere, or in a monastery where everything is the same, monotonous, and you know that particular description. So that's the answer to the second question.
Yeah, I have actually a couple of more questions, but one of them was saying that how would you figure out the rare events in terms of the evolutionary design? If the events will not be repeating itself and can happen to be catastrophic like, how would you relate this with the behavior?
The beauty about science is that it teaches the big picture. It makes us see the whole, the details, the random, the individual. These are things that populate the big picture. I got this idea when I was a little boy, spending a lot of time on the Danube. The surface of the river is full of black sheep, randomness, vortices rotating the wrong way. I mean, it's interesting that not every wheel rotates in the same sense, and but the river is moving one way. That way is predictable, not just the direction, but the shape of the river and the depth of the river. All these things are predictable from the constructor law, but order, you see, order or design is a, if you want something simple, it's a black line that's drawn on a background that others would call diversity and randomness and the unexpected. And this black sheep, in fact, is a nice metaphor, but it's incorrect. That background is full of black sheep, full of surprises. And in other words, with a principle, we predict the trend, not with the individual, let's say, whims of a person or an animal. That's the once again I come back to the previous comment on why hierarchy is not what Marxism preaches. Hierarchy is natural, and but on the other hand, the attitude that a person would know what is best for another individual is not natural. And here I think, how should I say, immediately about a dictator. That's the where I come from. That dictator was Stalin originally. A person who knows what another person should do or what is best for another person is destined to be wrong. You want another example? In fact, this is a very good topic. I had a student, a doctoral student, who before coming to Duke to be my student was a major in the Brazilian Air Force, and he was in paratroopers, and he was in charge of a I don't know if you call this a platoon of 300 people jumping from the airplane, and he told me, I asked him, what is your lesson from this kind of life? And he, as a leader, said, I learned that I cannot foresee what goes on in the mind of an individual. Meaning that under him, yes, soldiers were doing things that were maybe dangerous or maybe wrong, but impossible to predict, no matter how well the training was performed. So randomness is to be taken into account, but it's very important, just like the glove that surrounds the hand. The principle is the hand.
Yeah, okay. I have another question for you, Adrian. That is appreciating your talk and is asking that where did the research on learning from nature come from? And then continues, is your experience in studying art relevant?
The answer, it came from where I came from home in the first place. Second, education, very much like in Turkey, is a broad education. I'm talking about elementary, middle, and high school. Broad education. I was taught everything: botany, zoology, yes, biology, also geography and history, very much history, and of course several languages, not one foreign language, but several. And this sort of education is extremely valuable. I see it in students who come from not far from where I came from, but it is rare. Most people, especially in the advanced countries, because life is so easy in the advanced country, come from a relatively single-minded direction of education. One language, not much mathematics, and poor awareness of the rest of the world. So that's the answer to your question.
Thank you. I have another question for you. Is artificial intelligence can be a useful or will be a useful tool for predicting the vascular flow design?
Yes, the answer is allowed. Yes, all technology is useful. All the artifacts are useful. This is why people cannot have enough of the helping hands. You see, the problem with the problem I'm talking about news today is that every new technology comes with promises and warnings of danger. Every single new technology. This is the history of civilization. In fact, my best example is the fire engine, meaning the steam engine, the locomotive. When railroads appeared, they were menacing. They were first of all destroying farmers and farms. They were killing cattle. They were killing people. From which the English expression of bad news, I have been railroaded, which is which is an injury that you cannot, against which you cannot fight. All of that became part of the past because people are not stupid. People developed, came up with ideas called railroad crossings, overpasses, underpasses, tunnels, which separated the space occupied by the trains from the space occupied by the rest of us. And it's been peace ever since. In fact, you don't even think about how things might have been when trains started to spread 200 years ago. So I'm not worried about artificial intelligence because clearly, as I read the news, those who are qualified in the domain are thinking seriously about creating this, hand in glove collaboration between the technology and the naked human.
Yeah, I think, thank you. I think it is quite interesting. Your answer is, maybe the last question I'd like to ask you is that what would be your next research in vascular flow? Where are you going to heading?
I don't have an answer. I think the questions that I just answered would be a good topic to explore and also to express loudly because I think what's most important is for our kind of discussion to be made accessible to the wider public. To say, listen, everybody, in the university, we're speaking a language that everybody can understand. We are not talking about abstract things. We're talking about palpable ideas that are useful for everybody, especially for the young people who may be in high school and contemplating going to college. This is what's important. It's to make this science accessible, and that requires effort and creativity. So that would be, anyway, I'm inspired by this conversation, and I thank you. By the way, I want to thank Ahmed Shahin, who I saw put a comment on the screen. I remember him fondly, and I have to say about Ahmed is that he is a man who knows the history of civilization, and I value my conversations with him.
Thank you. Thank you. Actually, I think we don't have many questions, so probably we can stop here. But before we stop, I should one more time thank Prof. There's another, before we end the talk, there's no more questions, sorry. And I should thank the Professor Adrian BEJAN giving time for us to talk. At the same time, we really get inspired from his talk. And in future, I like to communicate more with him, and I like to invite him to TJU in Istanbul. And I like to see his participation in our programs, like research and educational programs, and active involvement. So definitely, by the time he comes, we like to have him here more or longer duration than what he used to visit Istanbul, looks like. I should thank to him one more time. Thank you, Adrian. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor.
Can you come over here, everybody behind me, that he will see you all. So this is not only me. We have a team of people that organized this. I should thank to them on your behalf, or you can thank to them. This is the below one is Ersun, who holds the hand, and Ilsu, can you hold your hand? And Gözde, can you hold your hand? And Fatma, can you hold your hand, please? Yeah. So we like to see you here, definitely in near future. Thank you, Adrian.